Hi, I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. Welcome to She Said podcast. Here on this podcast, we talk about the building blocks and the micro habits that help us create real and lasting influence. What do I mean by that? Well, we're talking about the kind of influence that helps you achieve your goals and whatever it is in life that you want to accomplish. But perhaps most importantly, it's the type of influence that helps you create real impact and that enables you to truly thrive. Hey, friend, welcome to the show. Have you ever dreamed of turning your culinary passion into a profitable business venture? Well, if so, you're not alone. And the good news is that the barriers to creating a content business, whether it's culinary or something else, have never been lower. But knowing how to price your time and your experience can oftentimes be one of the biggest challenges. And if you are anything like the average woman out there, we have a really hard time sometimes of valuing our expertise, what we know, our time, all those good things. I suspect that this topic will resonate very deeply with you. This week, we are getting smart in the kitchen and in business with culinary expert Marcia Smart. Now, Marcia is the founder of a company called Smart in the Kitchen. Marcia and I met at the Southern Sea earlier this year, where I discovered that Marcia is not only a whiz in the kitchen and with recipes, but she is also a very savvy and thoughtful entrepreneur with a great deal of wisdom that I think you will find both inspiring and helpful. Now, in this week's conversation, which is episode 294, Marcia shares her journey of building this successful business around her love of all things food. Marcia offers some really valuable tips on how to value your time and expertise, as I said before, which is a real challenge for many of us. Her insights apply, again, to any type of content creation business, and frankly, to anyone who is interested in the topic of influence and how to build it. In this episode, you will also learn Marcia's time-saving meal planning strategies. And a quick hint, it is not all about meal prepping. We also talk about some simple ways that you can streamline your cooking process to create more delicious and more seasonally appropriate meals. And Marcia also shares her secret to the perfectly cooked gluten-free pasta. I don't know if you've struggled with this, but I sometimes end up with a soapy mess, and Marcia has the secret for keeping that from happening. But one of the things that I also love about this conversation with Marcia is that she talks about the importance of creating content and extending that and her brand across multiple platforms. Now, friend, that is a wonderful way to really further expand your influence by building a stronger brand. And Marcia talks a lot about why that matters for her business. I think it's probably going to resonate with you too. Whether you are a foodie who is dreaming of a culinary career or a content creator who's really looking to monetize your passion, I think this episode is packed with such great advice that you can absolutely put to use right away. And as a bonus, Marcia is hosting a free cooking class for her Substack subscribers. You will find the link where you can sign up in the show notes for this episode. For now, though, here is episode 294, my conversation with Marcia Smart, who is indeed smart in the kitchen. Enjoy. Marcia, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am delighted to have you. I was so excited about this conversation because you and I became fast friends at the Southern Sea this year at the summit.
And I had listened to your podcast before that, and I was so excited to meet you in person.
Well, it was so fun. We had a great time together, but I was very intrigued, and I know folks will really enjoy hearing more about your story and hearing some of your tips and advice. So, why don't we start the conversation by having you talk just a little bit about what you do?
So, I am a culinary instructor and a food writer. I started my career in magazines at Parenting Magazine and went to cooking school in San Francisco about 21 years ago. And I've been a culinary instructor since then, but I also have a blog and I write recipes for brands or for magazines or newspapers still, and for my own newsletter and for my cooking school. So it's a combination of writing, recipe development, and teaching, which is all of the things I love. So I feel
Yeah.
very lucky.
Have you always been interested in food and the culinary arts and instruction and all those things?
I've always loved cooking, and I'm the youngest of three children, and my parents worked together. And so I think there was whenever I wanted to cook something or um, experiment, like I remember once I told my parents I was going to come up with my own cookie recipe without looking at any recipe. Like I wasn't gonna look at anything, and it was a total disaster, as you can imagine. I think it was
What could possibly go wrong, right?
one big cookie. But whenever they heard that I wanted to cook anything, they were like, "Yes, great, go, bless you. Please go cook something for us, for the family." But really, I loved cooking with my grandparents. My dad's parents always had a little tiny garden in the back of their place. And when it was time to make a salad for dinner at their house, it meant going out back and picking a carrot and some lettuce and tomatoes if it was tomato season. And it really taught me that vegetables have a season and that tomatoes taste good when it's summer. Um, and that a salad can be beautiful. My grandmother used to take pictures of my salads because I would make them look beautiful and then she would mail me the photos. So I always think that she would laugh if she knew about Instagram
She was
because
a woman
it was
ahead of
like,
her time, wasn't she?
yes, like it was like the, old fashioned way of Instagramming our photos by mail.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So maybe talk us through how and why you made the pivot from culinary writing, which I realize that you still do, but you now have a business that is largely your cooking school. You've also developed a fabulous cookbook, which I have sitting here behind me. You can see it on my shelf. But maybe talk us through how, sort of why and how you created this business around what you had been doing, but really kind of pivoted that.
So we moved from San Francisco, where I went to culinary school, to Houston about 19 years ago. And my career was sort of right where I wanted it when we left San Francisco, just like the universe will do to you.
Right.
And I was an assistant food editor for City Magazine, and I was freelancing a lot for Sunset Magazine and had like cover stories for Sunset Magazine, which is a West Coast magazine, and did some newspaper writing. I just was like in the mix of right where I wanted to be doing travel writing. And I loved the food scene in San Francisco. So we moved to Houston. I knew no one in the food media space here. And I had occasionally taught cooking classes in San Francisco for the school that I went to, like when they had private events and parties. And so I started to do that out of my home kitchen, just honestly as a way to meet people because I had no friends in Houston. And it was a great way to network. And I would donate them for preschool fundraisers or, other nonprofits. And it just really grew organically by word of mouth and um, kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
So by the time, you know, a decade later, by the time COVID came around, I was in like full throttle. We were teaching 3 classes a week in person, which kind of takes a whole day, even though it's a 3.5 hour class because we're prepping, setting up, doing, these recipe trays, recipe packets. I want it to be an experience where I teach them out of my home now. I
Mhm.
used to teach them at different locations all over Houston or other people's homes, but I really prefer to do it here. And as I explain to people, just getting too old to pack up all the equipment and unpack it. So it's really a hands-on experience. And obviously something that once COVID hit wasn't happening
Mm.
anymore, because it's a purely in-person experience and you're eating together and sitting down and it's really like a community builder because you're talking and chatting and getting to know people, um, and it's lovely and I love it.
Yeah.
And so COVID rolls around, my business totally hits the brakes like so many other service-based businesses.
Right.
And I kind of just started I took the time to really deep dive into some learning
Mm.
and biz I love learning from, different sort of business teachers online or reading. So I found Amy Porterfield during COVID and Stu McLaren and some other people. I think just as a product of being online, probably more than usual. And it just sort of gave me this. I had already been doing these free cooking classes, just as a way to
Mhm.
reach my newsletter list. The first time I had done Zoom was I do a lot of like TV demos for our local NBC morning show. So they had reached out and said, "Will you do a Zoom cooking demo?" And I was like, "Yes, I don't have Zoom, but I will figure it out." So we that's kind of how I operate is like, I don't know how to do that, but we'll figure it out. So the first time I ever did Zoom anything was on live TV, which is it luckily, all worked out. But I'm like, if I can do Zoom on live TV, I can do Zoom cooking classes for my newsletter list, they're all
Right.
very forgiving and I count them as friends and my community. So
Right. And your newsletter list is that's a subscriber based list. So that's something that you're charging for. That's part of your business, right?
so not until recently. So my newsletter has always been
Okay, so I think this is a really important question as to, how you begin to take those things that you start doing. Sometimes you're doing them because you have a particular
Mhm.
interest, then you realize that they can grow into a business, but learning how to price and value your services, whether it's the newsletter or your cooking classes, I'd love for you to get into that as well because I think it's such an important there's such an important component. And as women, oftentimes we don't always do a great job of understanding how much value we really bring and then how to price that value.
I think that's such a great question. And I think it can come up in so many businesses. I have a friend who's just newly starting a flower arranging business, and she does these bloom bars at
Mhm.
parties where she sets up this beautiful installation. And she said people don't understand how long it takes to source all the product and how expensive the flowers are. And I told her one thing that took me a long time to do was to put a dollar price on my time. So it takes a lot
Mm.
of time. I am, at the core, a culinary based service business, but I'm also a content business. And I have not
Mhm.
one newsletter. I have a blog that's on WordPress. I have a Kajabi newsletter, which is through the platform that I teach online cooking classes and where my membership is. I have a Substack.
Mhm.
I have a MailChimp. So and then there's Instagram, then there's YouTube. So it's a content and media stream that was all free. And it takes so much time and energy and thought and focus and quite honestly, money to film content and to, when I'm writing, I'm not able to teach a cooking class and that was my main source of income. So I dragged my feet like with a lot of things. Like I was very late to Instagram. Um, and I've been thinking of doing a Substack for a long time and reached out to a few people who had moved over to Substack, a few friends, and asked if there were any downsides, and all of them said no. So I'm so happy I did it. Um, my the only thing I'm struggling with now is like how to write. Like I'm a one woman show, so I write all the content and how to make that make sense for those different 5 content streams. Um,
Yeah. Because they're all different. It's different content, right, Marcia?
it's all
Yeah.
different content, and it's
How does it differ?
so, like, I have a free Friday favorites newsletter that goes out through my Kajabi list. And that's anyone who's ever signed up for a freebie with me. Like, I have a free meal planner or tips that I learned in cooking school, or they've signed up for a class or my membership. So that's like, that could be anything from last week, it was like, a great book I had read that has nothing to do with food, or like a pair of jeans I love, or it's just anything that I might have found over the course of the last week that I want to share with people. And it's very quick and easy to write. It doesn't take a lot of creative brain power. Like, I don't have to get up early and have a quiet space to write that. I can do it in like 2 seconds. Where Substack, if I'm sending a paid Substack post, I've hired a copy editor who's the copy editor for the Houston Chronicle to copy edit the recipes, the text. I've taken probably like a couple of weeks to belabor the post and like think about like, should this be a paid post? Should this be free? Like, I have one that was supposed to come out this week about that may not, because there was a weather event in Houston, so it might be the week after. But it's a bread post for my paid subscribers about a 2-day bread class I had, just about the different bread flours we used and the recipes and kind of the surprises and the favorite things that came out of that class. And it's also a story about my best friend from high school and the German pancakes that her mother would make us on sleepovers, and how that's one of the favorite things I teach
Mm.
in cooking classes to this day. And then full circle, my son is graduating from high school. So it's like she keeps popping into my brain, and I had to weave that recipe into that class because it just was like on my taste buds, you know? So that kind of post is a sort of memory food writing that takes more time and energy. Or like once a quarter, I want to do this deep dive. Like, I'll do a July meal plan post for my paid Substack people. That's like what to make in July here. And it could be what to make. It's really like quarterly, like seasonal recipes,
Uh-huh.
what to make. Here's the shopping list. Here are tips for making these recipes. Here's the equipment you might need. Here are all the substitutions. Like, a little bit more of a deep dive, where a blog post on WordPress is just going to be a recipe and it's going to have nutritional information. Like, I just did a chocolate protein smoothie recipe on my blog, Smart in the Kitchen, because I really wanted to, selfishly for myself, I wanted to see how much protein was in this smoothie that I keep making that I really love, um, and just kind of deep dive into the nutritional value, and then people can print that out. So
Yeah.
I really love the content portion, um, but it takes a lot of time.
So, if you were to give advice to somebody listening who wants to create a content business, whether it's cooking, whether it's in any
Mhm.
space, right? How would you advise her to think about building her business and creating a pay for model and figuring out how to value that service or that content? How would you start?
I think that's a great question. And I think women especially undervalue themselves or second guess their expertise. And I think it was Amy Porterfield who said, and she was talking about digital courses, you only need to know 10% more than someone else to have something to teach or to tell. So
Mm,
Substack is getting more crowded. So I would say, if you have been thinking about it, get on there, look around. I now subscribe to a lot of different food and nutrition focused Substack newsletters just to see what's out there. Um, but go for it. Like, build your newsletter list at all places and corners of the world. Like, I have put someone on my newsletter list in
Mm.
the line at the grocery store. Like, I can do it on my MailChimp app on my phone, or I can write down their, if they want to, if we're chatting and they don't realize they can get emails from me, like, those emails are so much more important and worth so much more focus than Instagram because you own them. So, but back to valuing your content. It is the tricky thing for me is trying to find a balance of how much to send for free and how much to charge for, because
Mhm.
it just it's a balance, and I still don't know if I have the answer. And I mean, I've only had my Substack, I think, since January. So, we're not even going on 6 months yet.
Yeah.
But I do think that as long as you have one paid post a month, you're going to have some people that are right away going to understand the value of your content. And what I've done is always teased a paragraph, because you on Substack, you can decide how much you want to release to everyone. So you can tease some of that content to show how valuable it is and what's coming.
And is that also how you use sort of use Instagram as a complementary, because obviously it's free as well.
Yes.
So are you using Instagram in a similar way so that that's helping drive
Yes.
eyeballs to your paid content?
Yes, like, it's basically just a teaser for anything that's a free download that is coming out on Substack or has just come out, a blog post, a class that's coming up. I don't want it just to be marketing for the sake of marketing. Like, I want some tips in there or something that they can
Mhm.
take away, but it's like 1% of the 100%.
Okay, I want to pivot us a little bit and get into a bit of the meat and get you to share some of these tips and tricks, not to give away the whole basket, but to give us maybe focusing on the fact that we are launching into summer. And one of your big areas of focus is efficiency in the kitchen. It's meal prep. It's especially great for moms, but not exclusively for moms, right?
Yes.
But talk about why you're so passionate about meal prep and why that matters, and maybe how we can think about summer meal prep.
Okay, so really quickly, there's a difference between meal prep and meal planning. So I'm actually a total advocate of meal planning, but not so much of meal prep,
Mm.
because I want everything made in the moment. I think it tastes better, and that's just the culinary background in me. I don't want chicken that was made 2 days ago. Like, I want it made, right before I eat it. But I teach a meal planning class online, and there's part of the course that I call the one thing that you can do on Sunday to make your life easier the rest of the week, which is,
Uh,
like, you can always make salad dressing. Like, I always have some of my homemade super simple salad dressing, which is in my cookbook, in the refrigerator. If we're out, I make more on Sunday. You can always cut some carrot or celery sticks. And then if you need those diced for the base of a soup or another recipe, you can quickly go over those and dice them for a recipe, and you've saved yourself time, or you can use them for snacking or whatnot. You can dice up fruit and have it ready. So I have a whole download on, the one thing you can do on Sunday to make your life easier. But for me, summer is a very different mindset, and it's so creative for me. I get a lot of my recipe ideas in summer because, if you're a mom, your kids are all underfoot. And if you have teenagers, they are in and out of the house. You sometimes don't know when they're home for dinner and when they're not, if they drive. Like, mine are all teenagers. So it's, even if you
uh,
ask them, where on a weeknight during school, it's a little bit easier to plan because you have a calculus test tomorrow. You are going to be home tonight studying. Um, so we are about to embark on summer, which for me is really fresh ingredients that don't need as much manipulation. So that means
mm.
less cooking, less heat. So things that go on the grill, things that get tossed into a salad, like a really beautiful Greek salad with feta, Persian cucumbers, tomatoes, or like a mozzarella or a burrata salad with cut heirloom tomatoes and even some sprouts and like a drizzle of balsamic vinegar and good olive oil. So good, fresh, seasonal ingredients that don't need as much. And unfortunately, if you are, a 50-year-old woman like me trying not to eat as much pasta, one of my favorite things in summer is pasta with like fresh tomatoes and fresh basil and fresh garlic and olive oil. But, whatever. I am always a 80-20. Carbs aren't the enemy. It's just getting enough protein and having a balance
Yeah.
I can never cut anything out, and I love all the things, which is a good thing. But
Are you a fan of any of the pasta alternatives? The chickpea pasta, which does have a little different, it becomes a little soapy, I find. Maybe I'm cooking it wrong, which is highly, highly possible, and I'm not so great in the kitchen. But any alternatives that you turn to if you don't want that, sort of regular pasta?
if so, I will do the Bonza chickpea pasta from time to time, but the trick is to keep your heat up high. Don't lower the heat when you add your pasta. And on the back of the box, say like for any gluten-free pasta, if it says to cook it for 6 to 8 minutes, cook it for 5 minutes and 30 seconds because gluten-free pasta tends to get gummy or soapy, like you said, and it continues to cook when you
Mhm.
drain it because it's still hot. So drain it right away and then warm it up with the sauce, and it doesn't save well. Like those leftovers continue to soften and get gummy. So just make as much as you are going to have that night. But we did a great, and I do a 6-week basics series that I'm actually doing online for the first time this coming fall, but we do it in person in Houston. And we do a Bonza pasta salad recipe in that class. And everyone's always shocked that it's so good. But it is somewhat how you make it because you cannot overcook it.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Okay, one of my other, sort of basic questions that I find when I think about, okay, I'm going to cook a meal for not just my family, but maybe we're going to have another family over, or maybe, two or three other couples over. And the part that immediately I'm overwhelmed by is how to time everything.
Yes.
What's your best advice for, coming up with your sort of meal
Mhm.
planning, right? And figuring out how the heck to time it. It is like,
Yeah.
it makes my head hurt so much just thinking about the topic.
Okay, so there's two ways you can go about this if you're having people over, and I'm having people over tonight. So I'm like just got organized, have all my ingredients ready to go. You can go with a quick cooking recipe or a slow braised recipe. So tonight we're doing actually a tri-tip recipe from my cookbook that goes on the grill, cooks super
Mm,
fast. It's going to be like, 15 minutes, rest, and then we're making also the kale Caesar in my cookbook and smashed potatoes. So
uh-huh.
what you want to do is say you can print all the recipes, or if they're in a book, you can do this on a piece of paper. You want to write like tri tip salad potatoes. Then on the right hand column of that piece of paper, you're going to write how long each one of those takes to cook. So tri tip 15 minutes, 5 minutes to rest. Kale salad, realistically think like how long it will take you to chop everything and make the dressing and toss it. So you're like 15 minutes. Then the potatoes, okay, those say they boil for 15 minutes and then they're going to cook in the oven for another 15 minutes and I have to toss them. So let's say 40 minutes. Um, then you work backwards. So you're like, okay, I'm going to parboil the potatoes first because you can add everything up at that point and know what to do first. And then logically, when you see it all together in one place, this was something we did in cooking school because we
Uh-huh.
had to be the chef of the night at near the end of my program and we had to fire things so they came out at the right time. And you also had to know, like for prep, what came out, what took longer, what had to be marinated, what had to be started, start a day ahead. So in like my cookbook, I do this and I try to tell people what you can do ahead. But also just when you're reading through a recipe, like if you're having people over, there's so much you can do ahead of time. Like know that you could boil potatoes a day ahead and cool them at room temperature and then just roast them, heat them up in an oven with some olive oil and salt to crisp them up. And you're not stressing yourself out. So just really kind of reading through and think about like, okay, what can I do? What can I prep ahead of time? Like almost that Thanksgiving dinner mentality. Like, what's everything I can do
Mm-hmm.
to take off my plate a day or two ahead? You'll thank yourself the night of when
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
I am so smart in the kitchen.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So, what do you have coming up that folks should be sure to check out? That you have coming up either in the cooking school or on your blog, things that folks might want to tune into.
Yes. So this summer, if you sign up for my Substack, I am going to have a free cooking class in July online for all of my Substack subscribers. So it will be run the same way as my membership classes, and all of my cooking school members will be invited also. But I'll cook 3 recipes, and usually people just like follow along and take notes and print out the recipes. But everyone will be invited to that, whether they're a paid or free subscriber. And I have my 6-week basics course coming up this fall. It starts, I think, on September 11th online. So it's online, but we will meet on
Uh-huh.
Zoom and they will get recordings for 6 weeks. And then I just have tons of freebies on smartinthekitchenschool.com. And I truly love helping people if they're stuck, if they need inspiration, if they just, are looking for a recipe. I answer every DM on Instagram or every email.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Be sure and follow Marcia on Instagram. She's smart in the kitchen, and you will not regret it because she shares great tips that will really entice you. If you're someone like me who's kind of a little leery of their kitchen sometimes, Marcia, you're always very inspiring. And so I really appreciate it. And I'm just so grateful that you had a chance to join me today.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. I appreciate it so much.
Of course. And we will include links to Marcia's website, to the Substack, to all those things that she mentioned in the show notes for this episode. It's episode 294. Marcia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, friend, thanks for joining me this week on She Said, She Said. If you enjoyed this conversation with Marcia Smart and got some value from the time that you spent with us, I would be so appreciative if you would consider leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening. Sharing this episode with friends who might also find it helpful is a great way to help and to build support for the podcast. Plus, it's a really lovely thing to do. You can also find all of the links that Marcia and I mentioned in the show today in the show notes. And as always, please be sure to connect with me on Instagram. You'll find me at Laura Cox Kaplan, where I share additional content, not only about episodes like this, but all sorts of things related to personal and professional development, as well as how you can build and sustain more influence in your life and why that matters. And as a final reminder, be sure to sign up for Marcia's free cooking class if you're interested in learning how to get smart in the kitchen. Until next week, you take care. And remember, She Said, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said, She Said Media.